So the first speaker today is Matt Wolcott. Matt is from Agbu. He's a geneticist. He's been there for many, many years. He looks at the applied end of the genetic evaluation, has that real interest in female reproduction and measuring traits that are associated with female reproduction, like body condition and weight, like we've heard over the conference. And Matt and Sam are both going to talk to you today about using genomics in the breeding program. So first we'll have Matt, and then I'll introduce Sam.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Sam, and thank you to MLA for inviting me to speak here today. Like Sam, I was given a pretty broad topic to talk around, which is just using genomics in the breeding program. I've kind of changed that around to hopefully fit this session today, where I'm preceding some breeders, industry people, so I thought I'd try and set the scene a bit around how we're exploiting reference population and genomic information in our modern genetic evaluation to help improve selection accuracy, and that really is the name of the game. So I think it'll be a pretty quick talk. We'll just look initially at the information that's coming into our current genetic evaluations and how that's entering the evaluation. And then we'll take a specific example from the Repronomics Project. So some information about female reproduction, how that's developed, how it comes into the evaluation, and how it's giving advantage to people who are using that evaluation. So I think I was kind of thinking this in terms of how breed plan was before single step, so before genomics were in the evaluation, and that allowed us to include reference information. But prior to that, we had a structure where seed stock breeders were recording traits and submitting pedigree information on the animals in their herds. I hope that group doesn't take offence when I say that those, relative to other categories of information, it's information that was relatively easy to collect and could be collected at reasonably low cost. And it meant that we get, or at least have the potential to get higher volumes of information from a wide range of sources, which comes in to our breed plan evaluation alongside genomic information. And increasingly that is a feature of information coming in from that sector. Comes into our breed plan evaluation and generates breeding values, which we're all fairly familiar with the form and function of. What the development of single-step evaluation has allowed us to do is to focus in on those really hard to measure, high value, high economic value traits, record them really intensively in a relatively small subset of the population. And it means that small subset has to be quite carefully selected. There has to be a lot of design go into developing these reference populations. They're traits that are hard to measure, expensive as a rule. We're getting lower volumes of those, but in association with very thorough genotyping in that section of the population, it goes into our genomic single-step evaluation. And despite all of this extra work, the final product still looks largely the same. It's still breeding values, but hopefully they're now coming with greater accuracy, which allows us to make more accurate selection decisions. And do that across the widest segment of the breed possible. So just a little example of how that's working based on the Repronomics Project, and specifically around intensive female reproduction or measurement of female reproduction. And Kath gave quite a good overview of this yesterday as it's being applied in the Southern Multi-Breed Project. I'll just give a quick summary of that. So a lot of the motivation for the Repronomics Project was following really pleasing results from the beef CRC that we had developed traits which allowed us to much more accurately describe female reproduction and bring that into the evaluation for these tropical breeds. We're doing that by ultrasound scanning, so we're actually imaging the ovary to identify when females start cycling in the case of age at puberty, or when they start recycling in the case of lactation and estrus. And we've actually seen these pictures before, but the one on the right there is a juvenile, or at least non-cyclic ovary. All of the little black dots within that ovary are follicles which have yet to reach that functional reproductive stage, where the one on the right is an ovary which is dominated by a single corpus luteum, and that is, identifies an animal that's cycling and is reproductively active. As I said, we've identified 2 traits based on this information: the age at which those females are first reaching puberty, and lactation and estrus, how quickly they return to cyclicity following their first calving. I think it's important to point out that despite all of the, this kind of high-tech information coming into the evaluation, it's still being distilled into the same EBV. So we're getting age at puberty, we're actually getting very good measures of days to calving in this project, we're getting lactation and estrus interval, but all of it comes into breed plan and produces the same looking breeding value for days to calving. It's just more accurate, has more spread, and lets us make better selection decisions. So just some hard numbers around that. I think we've had the heritability of days to calving put up in a few different presentations. As a rule, at the industry level, we are lucky to get heritability of 10%, 0.1. In the Repronomics Project, because we're measuring things with so much precision, that's a little bit higher. It's up around 0.15. But the really important component of this is that age at puberty and lactation and estrus are both kind of orders of magnitude more heritable. So, better than double the heritability of days to calving on its very best day. And that just gives us lots more opportunity to spread those EBVs out and improve their accuracy. It does rely on a genetic relationship between all of these traits. And thankfully, for age of puberty, 0.5, 0.6 correlation with days to calving, and even higher for lactation and estrus interval. So plenty of power there to drive accuracy for days to calving in these really hard to measure versions of female reproduction traits. And just to demonstrate the consequences of that, what can be achieved, this little table has got just subsets the Brahman population and gives us essentially the pre and post single step accuracies for days to calving EBVs. At the time that this analysis was done, the sensible group to take was 2016-17 born animals, and we just pulled out those that had a genotype, which is about 3,000 of those, to contrast how that information was impacting the accuracy of their breeding values. In the pre-single step era of breed plan, we're getting accuracies based on information from their relatives. There's no progeny information on those animals at this stage, in the realm of 30%, which is a number we were kind of becoming pretty familiar with in the area. That was about what you got on young animals at that time. With the inclusion of our reference information and genomics, we get a kind of small increase in accuracy for animals that don't have a genotype, but for those that do, we see that increase from 30 to 45%. And that is, half again the level of accuracy, and that is getting into the realms where we can make really useful selection decisions on the back of this information. At 26 and 30%, we would have been lucky to be publishing EBVs. At 45, all animals will have a breeding value published. And that's a real game changer in the north. So just coming back to this idea that we're able to improve selection accuracy via this single-step genomic-based evaluation, we can take the example, and this is a particular young bull that was made available at Brahman Week a few years ago. He came into the sale with no breeding values at all. He had not a single measurement on him. He had no progeny. and the information coming in from his relatives was sparse enough that he didn't have an EBV for any trait. So we pull a tail hair on him, put it into the evaluation, and we're able to get out breeding values for just about every trait. And as I said, that's despite him only having a genotype as the basis for developing those breeding values. And they have accuracies which are not too dissimilar from those we see for young animals with records for some of those traits. You know, it's 50s, 60s for weights, almost 40 for days to calving. So certainly useful information on his genetic merit. And I hope that's and it's important to say that it's only that genomic information that allows us to pull that together to give breeding values for that animal. So I hope that's a good introduction for what other speakers will be talking about here. Reference recording gives us the capacity to increase the accuracy of breeding values and the spread of those breeding values and make informed selection decisions on that basis. That's what I've said. Thank you very much.